Welcome to Inside the Champions Mind, a show dedicated to helping you overcome mediocrity in the pursuit of being world-class in life, love, and legacy. Welcome to the show. We're your hosts, Laurence.
And Karen Tam.
I was speaking quite fast there.
I know. I didn't want to say anything because I've said that to you a couple of times now. So
I'm just so used to talking so fast, so I didn't realize who was beside me.
I'm glad you self-acknowledged that.
Yeah.
Good work.
We're just trying to stop any arguments, as we talked about in our last episode. So, anyways, the last episode we talked a lot about arguments, and we talked about vulnerability, and also we talked about how we grew up and everything. And one of the topics we wanted to talk about today is this. It's like two depressing topics been back to back in a sense, more of a downer mode, which is very rare from a champion's mind perspective. But I guess in order for us to be champions in our life, in love and legacy, we have to actually understand the dark sides of us and also the parts of us that no one wants to talk about.
Well, because I think it's too easy all the time, is that it's just like, life is wonderful, it's perfect, and that doesn't help you when you're going through those periods of time. So it is something we need to discuss, Laurence.
Yeah, I think this is a podcast really dedicating to you, helping you, have the tools and resources and strategies to help you get, to striving towards the champion's mind. The key word is striving. It's not reaching the top at any point. It's always constantly getting better and better.
I don't think you ever attain it, do you?
No, I don't think so either. Because I think once you get, for any of us who are striving, who are people who are looking to become better versions of themselves, always find another better version of themselves once they find that. So there's always another 2.0 version of yourself over and over again. I guess this topic kind of came up on the talk that I gave, the speech, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, the Wellness Summit, and it started out that conversation. And it's a big realization that I had, and I never really dived deep into my own story, because I think I grew up in a relatively, happy life. And, that there was no, hardships compared to a lot of other people who might have had actually very difficult lives, maybe, parents being divorced, or there might have been some sort of abuse going through the family, or, whatever challenges that I didn't have to experience. But if someone mentioned this to me, and I can't remember who it is. It might have been Philip McKernan, but he basically was saying it's not so much that, it's not the thing that causes you to be in a situation, is actually how you felt as a childhood, because we all experience that feeling, like whether it be comparable to something else, it might be not as bad, but it's not that matters. It's actually how you felt at the time when you were a child, when you were 5 years old or 8 years old or 9 years old. And I remember clearly one of the things that, so my story goes is that, when I was 5 years old, I moved to, I went from Canada and I moved to Hong Kong. And when I was in Hong Kong, they speak a totally different language. They speak Cantonese, and where I spoke English, for 5 years of my life. And so I actually didn't have any communication skills until I started to learn Cantonese, and then develop Cantonese over the next 4 years. And when I was 9 years old, my parents decided for us to come back for a variety of reasons that I won't go into today. But
I know, because I think people who are regular listeners are thinking, I've heard this story before.
Yeah.
And I'm reminding you that because I know your memory sometimes goes on that. And
right.
I know this is just, I'm not trying to ruin your story, because I know where you're going with it. And I just want people to say, hang in there. We're not going to be telling the same story.
Yeah. It's a different aspect of it. And so, some of you might have been here the talk before, but I'm going to get to the point, is that basically when I was 9 years old, I came back to Canada. But the problem was that I spoke Cantonese for the last 4 years, and I lost most of, if not majority of my English. And so, which means that I came back to my own home country and I couldn't speak or communicate with the language. And so,
which brings us to the topic for today.
Well, exactly, because when I went to summer school, right? Because we had summer school during that time, and while my parents were figuring out where we were going to live, I went to school for, during the summer period with kids, and, we had recess back then, if you remember recess. And during those recess areas we used to go, kids would go and play and stuff. But the problem was that I couldn't communicate, and I couldn't communicate with my peers. I couldn't communicate with people. So I basically literally just sat, looked at my Timex watch, and just counted down, the 15 minutes, or 20 minutes, whatever we had during recess. And I didn't remember it until I kind of looked back in my life, and that was a very, very lonely period of my time. I felt lonely. I felt like I was the only person in the world. And, that feeling, I think, has occurred several times in my life, throughout my whole entire life. And I'm sure I'm not the only person who's ever felt that way before.
No, I've got a picture. Now, would this be around the time for people who are driving? I'm showing a picture of Laurence wearing sexy long socks that he's got pulled up really high. Looks like he's had a bowl stuck on his head and cut around the bowl for the haircut. It is a bad haircut. I'd want to share that one. Yeah. Would this be about the time that we're talking about?
It was probably a little up. Yeah, I was probably a little older than that. So I was probably about 8 years old or so. But yeah.
Because I think you look a little bit introverted in that. You look a little bit lonely in that.
You know what's interesting is that I was supposedly. I mean, I don't remember. I have a terrible memory, anyways. But when I was a young kid, I was told that I was very extroverted. I was used to dance in front of people and be a performer for my grandparents and stuff. But something happened. I don't know what it was. I really don't know what it is. I still can't figure it out. Maybe it was the move or whatever, but I became very, very introverted. I was actually very introverted all the way through pretty much high school. I was a geek. I was a total geek in high school. And even through university, I was quite, only had one or two friends. Even chiropractic college, and even to this day, like I'm there's times where I just feel like I'm lonely, and when I mean lonely, I'm not like I'm saying like I'm the only person, and I know I have a connection with a lot of you, but one of the key things of the loneliness feeling when I was a kid was more that I always wanted to fit in, right? And that's the thing
though too, because you can be surrounded by a lot of people. On all intents and purposes on the outside, people can think that person's got a fulfilling life, they've got tons of friends. But if there's not any deep meaning behind it, if there's not any connectedness, then I think there's a lot of people out there who are possibly feeling lonely, and we would never know it by looking at the surface.
Yep, absolutely. So it's easy to pick out, people say that they're lonely, quote unquote lonely, when they're actually introverted. Right, because introverted people...
Let's talk about that, because both of us are introverted.
Yes, yeah.
No, I wouldn't say we're far. Like, I know for myself, I took the Myers-Briggs test back in university, and I'm right on the kind of the cusp between introvert and extrovert, but a little bit more into the introverted side of things. So for what that would mean for me is that it's draining for me being around people. Extroverts will get so much energy going to parties, being around people. It just really pumps them up and it fuels them. But for me, I really have to get my headspace around large groups of people or being around people, because I have to dig deep to find the energy that I need to bring it up a level, to appear more extroverted and to connect with people. And I love it. I do connect. I feel great. But then afterwards I will reach a point that I can't do it anymore. And I just need to retreat, and I need to go home, and I need to sit in a quiet room and read a book, or I couldn't go to a party one night and do it 2 nights in a row. I just could not do that for me, because it just takes too much energy out of me to do that.
Yeah, it's once a year.
I know. One of us should be more extroverted. It would make it a lot easier.
Well, like if I had to qualify that, I'm probably a little bit more extroverted than you, but I'm still on the introverted scale.
That's funny though, because we were watching this video about introverts and extroverts, and what did they call it? The Irish exit.
The Irish exit.
And that is so us, because if we go to a party, I'll reach the point where I'm just like, I've given it all. I don't have anything else to go. I need to go. And I will just leave. I do not want to say goodbye to anybody. That's it, I'm gone. Whereas like Laurence will need to spend another 45 minutes going around and personally saying goodbye to everybody, and I can't do that. If there was a window, I would bail out backwards and I'd be gone. I'm like, what is that? White shadow. Yeah. You wouldn't find me.
I actually tried the Irish exit, not too long ago, actually, in something we went to, and it actually felt really good. So maybe I should try that more often. So no offense to those people.
If you're time poor, Irish exit.
Yeah, it's.
I don't know why it's called that.
Because that's what Irish people do. This is coming from an Irishman, by the way.
Yeah, is this true?
Yes.
To our Irish listeners, is this what happens?
I know several Irish friends, and this is exactly what they do. They just kind of just...
Well, I do have some Irish heritage, so maybe that's where it comes from for me. And being introverted.
I don't think I have any Irish heritage in me. So
we should get back on track, though. Loneliness.
Yeah, so being loneliness. The introverts are very easy to pick out, but the extroverts, though, I think can also feel the same thing, just in a different context, right? Extroverts are people who typically, they gain their energy, and they need that energy of actually being surrounded by a lot of people. But oftentimes they can also feel that loneliness when they're surrounded by a whole bunch of people, but unfortunately they don't actually have a really deep, what they yearn for is the deep connection, right? Which is what an introvert wants too as well. But the extrovert is that they on the surface may appear that they actually have a lot of massive amounts of connection, but in the deep level of connections that they actually don't.
If they don't have the tools to do that.
Exactly.
And I think it's also, too, it's hard for the extroverts and the introverts, because sometimes if we're really good actors or actresses, it seems like you would look at them and just say, they must have so many friends, they just have such a fulfilling life. And then you don't bother to invite them to things or to say, do you want to go grab a cup of coffee? Because you probably just think, they've got so much. They're not gonna want to hang out with me when in essence they probably would very much like to have somebody ask them for a cup of coffee or ask them.
Especially
to go
introverts,
and do
right? Because we're almost like introverts are usually typically going. They're
hard.
waiting for someone to invite them in,
which you can't do.
Right. Exactly. That's exactly where the fault is, right? Where the extroverted thinks, most people look at an extrovert and go, I know we're being very stereotypical here, but an extrovert, you look at an extrovert, it's like, well, he or she doesn't need more friends, so therefore you don't ask.
Well, it's almost like they have so many friends, you feel like you may not cut it to be part of their friend circle,
or their circle,
and that you're waiting for them to ask you, whereas they could be just silently inside, just saying, I wish somebody would ask me.
Yeah, and
it's like chefs. You never want anybody who's a chef or a cook. I never invite them for dinner.
Yeah,
and because I'm just like, they will criticize everything. I won't be able to do it good enough for them.
Well, that's what let's talk about Damien Christoph for a second, right? Damien, I remember the first time when we met Damien, because he was so into health and nutrition, and I remember clearly saying this to him. He was saying, he goes, "Oh, I just feel embarrassed for you to come to our house because you get to see, or even you preparing a meal for Damien. You were so stressed.
What do I cook for him? That's
right?
Not."
And Damien's like, I hate that when people. He hates it when people sort of have that expectation of him, like, that you can't prepare something, because what he wants, he just loves good food. He's no judgment. He's not judging your cooking or anything.
Puts us in our minds, our minds thinking that this is how it's going to be. Yeah.
But that's, going back to my childhood as a kid, it's like, I had to make a call there, right? It's like, do I constantly wait for someone to come to me, which is never going to be, never going to happen, or do I actually have to go outside my comfort zone to actually create the relationship that I want? But as a human being, most humans out there, I would imagine you listening and watching this show, is that you strive for deep connections. That's what you're really looking for, right? It's not about how many people you hang out with, but like looking for deep connections.
Well, you think about like biologically, like back in the cavemen days and stuff. That's what held us together. That's what meant your survival was staying in a group, your pack, and it was that closeness and that bond, and you really relied on all of that. But now, fast forward, we're in a technology age. Most people can work remotely from home. You don't have that workforce around you, or even in a workforce too. With the internet and everything else, it's more and more disconnected and so fast paced that people don't have the time to get down and get honest about things, that it's almost causing this underlying fracture in my mind.
Well, it's so interesting, isn't it, that we're more connected,
but we're more disconnected.
But we're almost disconnected. And I think we've had a couple of discussions on Inside Champions Minds previously. But my feeling on this is that as well is that for me, as a kid, or even as I growing up, even in high school, I had the worst time in high school. I went to an all-boys school. I was the typical, Asian nerd who wasn't even that smart.
I didn't mean to laugh. I don't know why. Yeah, it just starts making me giggle.
Trust me, there are no photos of me in high school.
I probably can find some.
I burned them all, and I've never shown them anyway because I'm still embarrassed by them. But for me though, like I was always looking to fit in. Even in universities, I was always like the kid just on the outskirt. I was just not right, and I was always wanting to fit in. And I think there's still, to that extent, for me now, to want to fit into groups. And actually to this day, for sure, absolutely. I remember we talked about the mastermind talks, how I was, invited to be, with 150 entrepreneurs, and it's like,
that feeling of insignificance.
That imposter syndrome of just feeling like, oh, who am I here to be here? And but it's what I want. I want to fit in, but I don't feel like I have the value to actually be fitting into this group or this.
You almost feel like you're looking on the window, like, hey guys, let me in, let me
Absolutely,
stay.
that's the exact feeling that I have. Majority of the time, it's like I'm looking from the outside, but I want to be in that party, but I'm not in that party. But the thing is, what I realized just in the last few months actually is asking the one essential question: why do I actually want to be in that group? Like, what drives me to want to be there? Is it just because of status, or is it, do I actually want to be because those are the people I actually want to hang out with? And that's a really important question to have. And I really recognize in certain groups I wanted to be in is actually has nothing to do with what I really want. Because now that, because I've been in certain groups, and then realizing, what am I doing here?
That's not the group for you.
I thought that's what I wanted. Yeah. But that's not who I am.
But that's good, though. It gave you some clarity. Like, you realized then that...
Absolutely.
That self-reflection onto it.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Is like, that was such an important realization for me, is that I spent my whole entire life, like literally my whole life, looking outside, looking in, wanting to be in the in crowd, and then trying to get in. And then now I'm realizing that I'm taking that one extra step and asking the question, like, why do I actually want to be in the in crowd? And And then that changes everything now, because then you start to go, whoa, wait a second. Forget about the in crowd. Like, we're the people that I want to hang out with.
Yeah.
And then go to there, because they're the ones who make me happy. Those are the where I get the deep connection. Because even when I'm in, I'm still on the outskirts, because either if I don't let myself fully in themselves, or I don't feel like they always see me as an outsider.
Isn't that funny? Because when I was younger, I was with the popular girl. It was us. And I didn't like the way she treated other people. And I made a conscious effort that I removed myself from that group. Almost to champion the underdogs, if you want to. They weren't underdogs. They were people just like anybody else. But I think that's a common life thread for me, is not neglecting other people and making other people feel left out. And maybe that's because I've moved around a lot, and I know how hard it is when you keep entering new places, new schools, new communities, because for some people, and it's not a negative thing, for some people, they have lived in the same area their entire life, they've grown up in the same town, they've got their friendship circle, they know everything, and they wouldn't think how it would feel for somebody who's coming into the area, who's new, because they've never been in that situation before, and they don't think to extend. And it's not everybody, it's a generalization. But from my experiences, I found they don't necessarily think to extend friendship offerings, little tidbits that would help you get into the crowd. And it's really difficult when you're new to an area and you're in that situation to get into these groups. And, you then have to put yourself outside your comfort zone and put yourself in situations that allow you to maybe control it a little bit more and to manipulate it. And manipulate sounds a bad word. But I do think it's a skill we need to learn. For Kaya, for example, when she came last year, or to any school, she's moved several schools now. Sometimes it can be quite difficult. Kids can be great. They can instantly bond and have friendships, and you think, gosh, it's so easy for them compared to adults. I don't know why that is. But sometimes, too, it can be hard to get into friendship groups. And if you sit there waiting for people to call you up for play dates, or, invite you around to birthday parties and to do all these things, you can sit there waiting a long time being unhappy. And I know we've had to teach the kids that we've had to be very proactive and organize events and contact people and create situations that have allowed these friendships to foster and to do that, and not to sit passively by.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think many people are actually every day going out there like, I'm looking for a deep connection today. That's not how people function, right? Yeah. And so, in order to create deep relationships and deep connections with people, it's longevity. It takes time to build, like any relationship. What we're looking for is someone's like, oh, you're so connected to me. I'm, like, I get you. And then,
get that, but I think it's sometimes hard as well, because if you feel like you're constantly putting yourself out there, and it's almost like fishing. You're constantly fishing, trying to lure in a friend, and there's no bites. Then after a while, that itself, it's
tiring.
It's tiring. And it's also almost a self-fulfilling prophecy in that you want to give up.
Yeah. And it's very easy
to not do that anymore.
But the challenge is that constantly reminding yourself that in order to actually create any relationship, the energy and effort has to put into it. Just like, us, when we first started, we had to put in the energy and energy into the relationship. Well, relationship with a friend or, deep connection with other people still requires us to kind of take the effort and time to make those connections. Sometimes it's a small little messages, and it might feel like one way for quite some time. At the end of the day, though, if it's a worthwhile relationship to pursue, with no hidden agenda, but other than, this person I feel like I find intriguing, that I want to build a deep connection, it's just continually, allowing them to actually continuing to work on that relationship. And that relationship sometimes takes time, because they're on the other end, they may not be looking for any deep relationship, or that's not what they're thinking about.
Or their friendship plate might be full, and it's not what they're
because they got their time and energy, and they got exactly with the time and energy, they might not have the time and energy to space.
And I think it's important to think, though, I don't think they're going out of their way to exclude you or to not include you, which in your mind you can start thinking, what's wrong with me? Aren't I good enough? Aren't I why don't they like me? And I don't even think they're even thinking about you.
No, everybody's thinking about themselves.
The majority of the time we were just thinking about ourselves, and I think it's important to know that as well.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it's no different than I think what happens is that when we put people in pedestals as well, and so when you put someone in a pedestal, you a higher pedestal than you think that that they're a lot higher than you, but they're just remembering that everybody's a human being.
Just regular people.
Yeah, I met some amazing high profile people, but really they're just human beings. And when you actually get to talk to them and you go, wow, they're just regular people, not the
same
person
insecurities, same things.
Yeah,
I would think it must be hard for those people. They must be feeling loneliness as well, because people just think I can't approach them or I can't really talk with them, and they must feel so isolated.
Oh, exactly.
Trying to find people who just want to be friends with them for who they are, not for
because of the fame or just want to take a picture with you or something. And that's really tough. And a lot of people, it's funny. Like this is such a weird thing. I remember we were at the Wellness Summit, and I was literally walking back towards the room. I was kind of walking, and there was this other person that was walking, and it was just kind of an awkward moment. We're just kind of standing beside each other, walking towards the door, and then I remember I just kind of quickly walked faster just to kind of make a joke. I'm like, I'll beat you to the door, right? And then she's like, and she kind of laughed, and then she goes, I don't remember what she said. She said something like this. She goes, my heart's kind of racing because I feel like I'm like a fan, like she's a big fan or something like that. And I'm like, really? Like she was so basically.
You're looking around. You're like, where? Who? Me?
Yeah, me. Like she was so scared to kind of just say hello, because she just put me on a pedestal as if I was someone completely, that is unreachable. And I make a point, especially on those events. I make a point in everything that I do is that who I am on stage is who I am off stage, and I don't want to be known as the person who speaks and stuff. Like, please come to talk to me. But that's the challenge sometimes, because a lot of speakers that I know is that a lot of people actually go up to them because people see them as like this level that they don't have anything important to say to them. So therefore they don't actually approach them. But for them, they're thinking like, how come no one's talking to me? And so I know that actually goes on because of that pedestal thing, because we position people on a certain level. But really at the end of the day, I think we need to remember that all of us are just human beings. Mm-hmm. All of us are looking for deep connections, and and having that understanding, because it may not work. Maybe the speaker you talked to was an ass or whatever. That's fine. We just move on. But not everybody has that same thing. Some people have ego. Some people try to keep their ego at bay. But everybody's different. But I think
it's so interesting too, because sometimes we've seen people on stage and they seem so extroverted. And then when they get off stage and you talk with them, you realize they're quite introverted.
Yes.
And you have to kind of change your tactic in speaking with them and stuff, because, I think we observe people and their persona they put off, and we judge that's who they are as a person. Yes. And we don't really get to know them until that deeper conversations and connections is when we're dealing with them.
Yeah. And I think this is where like podcasts and things are a little bit different, because you have more time to actually connect with us, and it's a longer period of time where over an hour or a period of time, it's not it's very you just get a snapshot of that person. But over 100 episodes, you kind of get a different facet, because you start to see different sides of it. And even people have made comments on ever since episode 101 when you first started, they're seeing a completely different side of me that's softer or whatever it is. I never realized I was so hardcore, but that they're seeing a different side of me because of the energy and the feminine energy that you're bringing to the picture as well. So, which is interesting, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
All right. So where do we go from here? So in the sense of things, one of the things is that it's so important. I think the loneliness also carries through is as adults, it can be quite tough. I think because it can lead to a lot of different problems. And there was a study that that I was reading. I don't know exactly who came out with the study, but I'm reading this book called Grit by
what's it called?
Grit by Angela Duckworth. And Angela Duckworth was talking about this particular study about rats and dogs actually. And you're not going to like this experiment,
no.
But there was an old experiment where which they replicated with rats. But in the old experiment was that they actually had dogs, and they put into these electric floors. And what they did was they had 5 seconds of shock. But there's 2 scenarios. One with that they would put these dogs, and if they shocked them, but if they just put their nose in something, the shock would stop. Right?
What do you mean put their nose in something?
Against a wall or something like. I can't remember what they
did.
They
did a behavior.
They did a certain behavior. If they figured it out, they did a behavior,
yes.
and the shock would stop, so the pain would stop. Whereas the other scenario was that no matter what the dog did, it would still be there. It didn't matter.
Yeah.
So then they actually later on, a couple of weeks later, they would put them in a different situation, same situation where they can hear the electric shock start to come, and so the dogs who were in control, they actually could create the change, leapt above the wall or whatever it was. They basically they knew that they can control the outcome.
So they're conditioning the dogs, if I'm getting this right. They're conditioning the dogs with 2 sets. One set knew that they had control over their life,
of their situation.
The other set was led to believe that they had no control over anything, and it didn't matter what they did.
That's right.
It was going to be a negative experience.
That's right. So the one dog that had control would find ways to figure it out.
Yeah.
And then the ones that, didn't have control just basically laid down and just took it.
But just gave up.
Yeah, just pretty much gave up. Not all of them, though. That was the interesting part. Not all of them did. Only a portion of them. Some of them, a portion of them, I can't remember what the percentage, would still continue to try to find ways. And they were trying to find what makes those dogs more resilient and have more grit, where some dogs are just give up. Just will take the shock for 5 seconds because they know they can't do anything about it. And that, the differentiation between the two. And the thing was, what some of the conclusion was, when you think about it, is that that's what's called learned helplessness. Is that we, if we grew up in a childhood and through circumstances thinking that we have no control over our lives or situations or emotions, like say loneliness, or just that we, I've tried everything. I've tried everything to make this work, so no one wants to be friends with me. Yeah. And if that self-talk continues,
that becomes your mantra.
That becomes the wiring of your brain, and then therefore you won't even try anymore, because that's the learned helplessness mentality, which means that he's like, oh well, it's this has always been me. And we see that over and over again. And I'm sure there's characters of me that I haven't broken away from, because I felt that that's just me,
Well, that's what I worry about with labels. Or were you going to say something?
Well, sorry. Like, for example, right? Grammar, right? My Chinglish, right? People have been making fun of me in the last 5 years, right? I just kind of took it for the first little bit. I just took it. I goes, I'm never great in grammar or language. And I it's sort of go, you know what? That's just who I am.
Yes, I've called you on that.
It's so easy.
That's the problem that I have. It's that's a label. Is that it's nice to label ourselves to understand ourselves, but then when that label prevents you from being able to do stuff, because you'd say to me that's just how I am. That's my English, and I'm like, but it doesn't have to continue to be like. Why are you then stopping? You can make every effort to improve past that point. Yeah,
so I mean, in order for me to cope with beginning was I actually started doing videos more so than writing, and so I didn't write it very often. But then the last couple of years, I challenged myself to actually write more, and actually been getting a lot of great feedback from the writings that I do, some of the blogs that I'm writing, and then that causes the positive reinforcement that I can do this, and that's when the rewiring started to occur. And now I believe in myself is that, hey, yeah, I might not be the greatest English grammar writer, in terms of things, but I'm actually improving. And this is where the study starts to go, is that, on Mindset, by Carol Dweck, I think that's her name.
I don't know.
And so she basically talked about, and from a resilience point of view, is having not a fixed mindset, which means that people who have a fixed mindset that you're never going to improve. You whatever your talents you have, or whatever mark you're either smart or you're dumb, right? Versus the mindset of that you can improve this. You can, no matter how dumb or smart you think you are, you constantly have to challenge yourself to know that with the hope that you can do this. And that's what that mindset is what makes people successful in parenting and in your job and your careers and everything else. And that whole entire mindset is completely different than the learned helplessness.
I like to think of it like a sliding scale, because I don't think we're always at just one point. Like people say there's life or there's death. There's one or the other. But there's not. There's a sliding scale. And there's a sliding scale for everything in life, because you're either a little bit more to the left or a little bit to the right, but you shouldn't constantly be staying in that same spot, because if you're not making changes, then you're actually slipping more to the left, going more into the negative, going down. And if you are making changes, you're going more to the right. And I think it's important to know where that resilience is. There's always that, it's like a dance. There's that constant movement that is available.
Well, I like to think of it as almost, you're absolutely right. I'll add something to that, is that it's the direction you're going.
Direction. Very good.
Yeah. So no matter if from a scale to 0, say 0 to 10, it doesn't really matter what number you're at, because that's just at the snapshot of that point. Yeah. But I'd rather be a 2 moving towards 10 than an 8 moving towards 0. And so that's the key. It's the directional point of view of where you're going. And that's the resilience that we need to kind of develop. And how does this relate to loneliness, right? Well, loneliness,
I forgot we were talking about loneliness then. Yes, back to loneliness.
Loneliness is just one aspect of the feeling and emotions that you feel. What I'm saying is that what these studies have shown and how we act in that state matters. Because if you're locked in to a state or that you can't help, like you're just relying on someone else to help you rather than you helping yourself and taking actions and start to chip away. Like I said, sir, it takes a lot of freaking effort to actually go out and meet different people in certain groups, or to kind of build those relationships. And sometimes you fail, but you got to be okay with those failures.
Get back up again.
And keep on going and develop and continue trying different aspects and different people until you get yourself out. And so the point of it is that you can either stand still and take it, you're feeling the emotion, that the negative feeling that you have, or you can create other ways and create a different self-talk inside your head, and actually create a new identity for yourself, right? And constantly pursue whatever things you're challenging for. Whatever, it might not even be loneliness, but it might be something absolutely completely different. But the whole goal is, how do you have enough resilience to continue to strive and know that you're in control of your situation, of your life? And having that knowledge of knowing that and having that hope that you have control over your life is a very, very powerful thing.
Because I think for a lot of things, it feels outside our control. Because people might be sitting there thinking, well, my father's had this accident, or this happened to my mother. I have no control over this. And it's very overwhelming. But you were saying to me the other day that it's important to then look at, what do you have control over in your life? And to put your focus and your time and your energy into that, instead of all the emotions and the stuff that you can't change. Like, your mind's obviously going to go to those things, and it is important to acknowledge those feelings, but to stay in that state isn't serving you or anybody else to do that.
Yeah, and back from our last podcast is that stop being so reactive, but being proactive on the decisions that you can make, which is all the things that you can control, right? And having that thought process to actually think, because what we typically do, and I'll leave it with this, is that when something goes right, we will take attribution to ourselves. It's because of me, right? But when something goes wrong, what we typically do is it's something else. It's your fault, the environment's fault, something happened, but you never blame yourself. And what I'm asking is, it's always in your control. Like, in a sense, you can't control certain things, the environment, raining, sun, whatever, you can't control that. However, what you can control is, what could you have done differently, but that was within your grasp? How you behave, how you saw it, how you acted, how we talked about that in the last episode. All those things are still within your control, even when things go wrong. I think that is what champions do, is to be able to reflect and know, and then course correct and adapt accordingly, so that you're constantly improving and becoming a champion in your life.
It's like sailing, tacking away, or in a plane. You put your life mask, you put that air mask on you first.
Yeah, instead of blaming everybody else.
Yeah,
guys, it's I hope that you enjoyed this particular podcast on I don't even know what topic we call it. We call it loneliness, and we talked about resilience and a whole bunch of things. So go to facebook.com inside the Champion's Mind, like it there, comment there, and love to hear your side of things. Have you ever felt lonely? Have you ever felt any difficult challenges that you had to go through? Maybe share your side. And I know you might not want to do it publicly, then maybe message us. I'd love to hear your side of things too as well. Go to Wellness Couch, obviously, to hear this particular podcast, and subscribe to us on iTunes, because people, and actually more importantly, share
Tell your friends.
Tell other people about this podcast.
They're missing out.
Yeah, I think that if you're getting value from it, I think they'll most likely get some value out of it too, and then you can have a great discussion point and form a deeper relationship. This has been Inside the Champion's Mind, a show dedicated to helping you overcome mediocrity in the pursuit of being world-class in life, love, and legacy. I'm Laurence.
And I'm Karen.
See you on the next episode.